I pledge that in a Trump administration, our nation's religious heritage would be cherished, protected, and defended like you have never seen before. We will not allow government workers to censor sermons or target our pastors, our ministers, our rabbis. These are the people we want to hear from, and they're not going to be silenced any longer.
President Trump pledging to cherish, protect, and defend America's religious heritage during his address to the Values Voters Summit today. The president also promising that the government will no longer interfere or, quote, silence the nation's religious leaders. Joining me now, Vander, Plaats, CEO of the Family Leader. Bob, thanks for joining us. You know, it's just remarkable to me. At the beginning of the campaign for the GOP nomination, the Values Voters Summit, you know, they took a straw poll. President Trump at the time got 5% of the vote. He ended up winning over that group of voters going into the election, and they probably pulled him over the finish line. And it feels like today he came back and said, listen, I kept my word to you. Do you feel like he's lived up to the promises that he made along the campaign trail?
I think he really has, especially on this one. When you take a look at it, Charles, initially we had 17 candidates running for the Republican nomination. When we had our leadership summit, we had 10 of the candidates, including Donald Trump, on stage. And one of the key things, in addition to the Supreme Court nominee, which we got Gorsuch, which is a huge applause for Donald Trump and the presidency, but was this religious liberty issue. And so what he did today and what he did last week, Friday, doubling down that we're going to protect our religious liberty, the First Amendment, we're not going to silence the churches. These are the people we need to hear from. That's huge, and that is music to our ears. And so, as I've told you before, being a friend of Trump, we cheer him on when he does things well. We try to hold him to account when he needs to be held accountable. But right now, we're cheering him on. That is big news for the faith community.
What do you say to those who say that religion and religious leaders were never necessarily under attack in this country, and that you know, that this is not necessarily a big deal?
Oh, it is a big deal. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at the photographer, or the baker, or the person that that's operating a venue. They've been sued and sued out of business. Take a look at what happened at Houston, and I think President Trump referenced that today, where a mayor wanted to basically censor the sermons that were going out in Houston. No sermon should be censored. We want to hear the sermons. We want the public to hear. We want to hear what God's word has to say, so we can invoke that into a culture so we know what right and wrong are in a culture. And I think that's what President Trump was saying today.
Bob, how important is it that the president promotes Judeo-Christian values, and how important has it been to the success of America? In other words, has that been a key component of why America is the greatest country in the world?
Without question. I think when you talk about American exceptionalism, right there is where it's at. George Washington had it right, where he said there's two inseparable rungs to this thing that we call a republic, and that's religion and morality. Religion is there's a God, meaning there's something higher than Charles or something higher than Bob, so let's aspire to God's law versus our selfish desires. And then morality is that if you're going to govern yourselves, you need to be good, and you need to be governed by a moral code, and that moral code comes from the scriptures of what we know defines right and wrong.
You know, I got to tell you, you know, we've lamented so much about pushing God out of schools and other parts of our lives, and consequently, some of the issues that we're dealing with as a nation, some of the tougher issues. Merry Christmas. Is that the small word, 2 words? Is that in of itself? Just think about how much has been pushed out of advertising in stores and things like that. If we can even start to say things like that, do you think we're back on the road to sort of being the nation we once were?
Well, after 8 years of President Obama, who actually lived out pretty good family values with his wife and 2 daughters, but his policies were completely anti-family, and it seemed like he was always wanting to drive God out. Even at the Democrat National Convention, where they wanted to take God out of their party platform. So now that you have a president who's willing to acknowledge God, willing to champion religious liberty, willing to give people freedom again to say Merry Christmas, All these stock markets that you like to talk about on Fox Business and how they're doing so well today, a lot of them are going to make a lot of money coming around Christmas time. I think it's time we shelve the happy holidays and we actually say Merry Christmas.
Well, I'll say Merry Christmas to you now, and I also say God bless you, and I appreciate you coming on, Bob. Thanks.